Test, test. Let's see if anybody can hear me. Test, test, test. Can anyone hear me? Hi, let me know if you can hear the audio. We've got like 1 minute before I'm scheduled to go live. Thank you so much for joining. Hi. Wonderful. Does it sound okay? Thank you for indulging. All right. I guess I should put some lip balm on. I hear. That's what I read. Yay. Okay, YouTube. So this is my first time broadcasting live, period, and definitely live on this channel. So this will be quite exciting. Technical difficulties aside. Okay. It's 7. So let's jump in, everyone and everyone. Hello, hello. My name is Megan Donovet, and I'm excited to welcome you all to the very first episode of You Deserve Real Talk. This is a series that I'm excited to launch on this YouTube channel that explores instances within pop culture that capture everyone's attention, but we're going to take a deeper look at these instances within pop culture to explore their framework and how they impact Black women in particular, and those that ride alongside of us and with us, how they impact our lives, our agency, and our self-worth. Talk about ways that we're featured across media, our representation, because it matters. And then ultimately, because we live in such an oppressive state, high patriarchy, ways that we can ultimately move past just observing and being victims and or participants in these structures, but actually take steps towards healing. So that's what we're going to cover today. I'm cleaning my glasses. Give me 1 second to grab a tissue and a water. And I've got notes. So today's first Real Talk, You Deserve Real Talk series, we're going to deep dive into Sean Combs' The Reckoning and do a deep dive with respect to the hour that I have designated and the fact that everyone has been watching the documentary on Netflix. This has been the most recent one, as produced by Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, and it was produced by a woman. So I'm going to try to pull up her name as well. So we have a little bit of bias, but the actual documentary has made waves all over Netflix. It's been #1 for over a week because it's broken down into 4 parts and details with graphic receipts and graphic video reference. The allegation that Diddy, Sean P. Diddy Combs, is the true mastermind behind most of hip hop's most infamous strings of murders, exploitation, abuse, and prolific thievery. Yes, Sean is notorious for not paying his bills. And so over the last week and a half, a lot of bloggers and cultural critics have been talking more so around the fact that there's some revelatory discovery that Sean is a monster. But I am telling on my age. I've known of P. Diddy for years. I'm a proud graduate of Howard University. This is 2 years, I can say, 2 times. I'm a double graduate of Howard University. And way back in the early 2000s, P. Diddy was notorious for throwing parties, notorious for heating up the charts. We loved us some Bad Boy, and he was all over the airwaves, all over the record industry and videos. And just like Suge Knight said, he was everywhere. HU, yes. But we, as in pop culture at the time, those that bought CDs, those young women that ran to the video shoots, those artists, young artists that aspired to be on the label, we were all complicit and a part of Sean's notorious rise. So some of the things that we saw in this documentary, honestly, were not new revelations for a lot of us that grew up in the early 90s. We're partying at Dream nightclub in the 2000s. We saw a lot of this stuff firsthand. We've heard the rumors. The party promoters have whispered about did they not get paid by the Bad Boy Street team? I mean, we can all pull our various receipts. What I think was great about this documentary, let me just kick it off by saying, is that it goes into detail and strings together the fact that there are patterns in this industry and does a great job of propping up the fact this is an institutionalized, systemic string of abuse, like a ring of abuse. This is not anything that happened like as a one-off situation. And if we can all use our best critical thinking minds, although P. Diddy Combs, is currently detained for several crimes. He is not convicted for all of the crimes that he's alleged to have committed. And he's not alone. I think that this documentary also pointed that out and made very clear allegations that he, one man, cannot single-handedly propel this entire force of abuse. It's a system. And it's a learned behavior, learned practice, and complicity is one of the ways that it's maintained. So I'm jumping forward. Let me put on my glasses and get to my notes. So one more disclaimer, if that wasn't clear. My glasses, there we go. If it's not clear, we're not going to really focus too much on Sean Diddy, the monster. I feel like P. Diddy Combs' exposés are going to be endless. Even right now, Marlon Wayans, I think 50 Cent are currently going back and forth trying to unearth each other's closeted sexuality. You know, we're going to hear about this for months, if not years, going forward, because there's no better time than to talk about Diddy than right now. It's pretty relevant. I'm more interested in discussing how this documentary and its revelation of over 30 years of abuse and exploitation deeply impacts Black women. Let's talk about our agency, the systems that keep us oppressed and keep us silent, and as well as the ways that we contribute. Touchy subject, but yes, our agency and our contributions there. And then lastly, how we can work towards healing. So we're not just digesting all of this content and all this information, but what actionable practices can we take to move forward, to love better, to love ourselves better, and love those around us. So with all that said, I'm going to jump right into the framework of which we use to analyze this. So again, I'm Megan Donovet. The quick and dirty is my master's thesis was completed over 18 years ago. My background is in mass communication and media studies. So I know a lot about a little bit of essentially critical thinking and absorbing how media systems impact the globe, the way we think, critical theory. It's a whole lot. But 18 years ago, I put together this great research and put it together in this thesis that was groundbreaking at the time. This was during the early ages of Superhead. So this was 2007. So that was a prolific revelation actually within popular culture that a former sex worker was able to tell her story. Anywho, a whole nother video. 18 years ago, I wrote this master's thesis and essentially was framing this hot girl industrial complex, which is the hip hop industry. And I theorized that the hip hop industry, essentially, it's a systemic practice, a systemic industry that's being upheld by patriarchal frameworks, and Black women's bodies, Black women's bodies, pretend or illusions of agency, talent, and the commodification of our gifts and labor. And because of all of those things, the industry is a very dark and demonic place where women are often propped up and used, but never fully recognized as equal, nor do we get a just position within the hip hop industry. At the time, it's very much, shut up, bitch. Nobody really cared. Fast forward 30 years later almost, and the same things that I've been theorizing are still taking place, if not, but like in 4D, if not in the smaller sense that we can now see it on videos, or we did see it in videos. We read about it in magazines. Do y'all remember those mastheads that actually produced like gossip magazines, like Vibe? We've moved past that now. We can see these things playing out day to day within our social media platforms, Black women's bodies being commodified on sites like OnlyFans. What's the one everybody loves run by that Black woman, but it's so MAGA? Y'all know what I'm talking about with the gossip. I stopped subscribing like a year ago. The Shade Room, thank you. The Shade Room. I could go on and on and on. That's not why we're here. But the point is, in that same vein, this documentary pulls back the curtains on the fact that this industry is run explicitly by the commodification of women's bodies, Black women's bodies, and our abuse is depending on people's abuse and exploitation, Black women in particular. And it's a machine. So my thesis framework that we're going to use to break down the 4-part series tonight, I'm going to extract from that thesis framework. I said a lot to say this, and we're going to break it down into 2 parts. First is understanding the reckoning with the 4-part framework that I'd like to utilize from my thesis. And then the second will be the restoration, how we can move forward and work towards healing with actionable practice steps. So let's go. Anybody still there? Amanda's still there. Hey. Okay, so the hot girl industrial complex. This is my layman's term for a massive critical theory, but let me just give you the layman's terms because we'll continue to use this throughout aspects of this Real Talk series. This framework is essentially how we're going to break down a lot of instances within popular culture, but for sense and purposes, the hot girl industrial complex basically breaks down where Black women's bodies, our labor, our stories, and of course, our agency, keyword, is turned and exploited into profit and content and labeled as entertainment. And this structure, this hot girl industrial complex, based on our sexuality, if you will, it's not just limited to the hip hop industry. You can see it in different industries like sometimes hesitate to say it. You can see it in Hollywood. We see it on a lot of acting, a lot of internet sites. I've referenced to a couple of those gossip blog sites that depend on Black women at utilizing certain tropes in order to generate revenue, eyes, clicks, revenue. All of these things are not uncommon. This is a theory. This is a pattern. This is a proven marketing strategy that works. Aspects of corporate America depend on this for marketing and retail dollars. And even in our interpersonal relationships, we can see that because this systemic practice it's based in patriarchy, steeped in patriarchy, it's learned behavior. We can interpret some of those basic practices as things that we should utilize in our own lives. They become learned, and then we end up replicating them in our interpersonal relationships. Many example is question, ladies, how many of us have become pick-me's, or if you found yourself aspiring to center men in your day-to-day life, that's patriarchy, outside and above yourself, centering the validation and the acceptance of others. We can go on and on and on in separate videos, but all of this is dependent upon how Black women see ourselves and how we present ourselves in media. There are certain institutions that are dependent upon the Black woman being viewed as a sexual entity or exploiting aspects of her body, brain, and labor. And they depend on that. So if we don't know ourselves, basically that's what this hot girl industrial complex is suggesting. The lack of knowledge of who we are is what really drives this industrial complex. It keeps the machine machining. So we're going to break down the documentary into 4 frameworks. The first is body commodification. Black women's bodies are very rarely, if ever, treated as equal or fully human. So they're often weaponized against ourselves, treated as products, assets, or like asset, like a trophy, or something to be not accumulated. The word I'm looking for is like if you collect them all like a Pokemon, something to be what's the word, everyone? Commodified. Thank you. but it's not commodified. It's a synonym. I'll come back. But bodily commodification is the first. The second is narrative control. Who controls the narrative? When we talk about the hot girl industrial complex, 10 times out of 10, it's patriarchy. Patriarchy works overtime. Black women work hard, patriarchy works harder. So the narrative is often controlled by patriarchal forces, those that are in power and control. They work to keep those that are more vulnerable and oppressed silent, make your voice weakened, or question yourself so that you're unwilling to share your voice or utilize your own story. That's key. So ultimately, Black women become pet players, assets, side pieces. We love to use that word side piece in stories that we should better feel comfortable and confident in telling, as opposed to letting patriarchy or the forces in control tell our stories. You can think about how we believe victims or don't. Look at like 3 years ago, 4 years ago now, how the Me Too movement changed everything. And at the base of that said movement was the simple idea that who is going to believe a victim? And yet there are so many. Number 3, complicity as survival. Hey, gold diggers. Hey, yes. Hey, Candace. Number 3 is complicity as survival. So the system will require that you need participants in order to keep it going. And we saw this all throughout the documentary, but we can also see this in our everyday lives. You have to be quiet or play along in order to get along. And your driving motivation to do that can be several different reasons, but for Black women in particular, the typical driving reason that we are complicit in a lot of these systemic oppressive situations. Anyone in the chat? Capitalism. All right, we're going to go along to get along because we got to eat. Baby got to eat. Baby got to keep clothes on. Baby doesn't want to be a poor. So a lot of things look more appealing when you start to dangle people's survival skills, their basic needs in front of them. So we go along to get along. We saw that even down to the promoters, the security guards, slash, what is going on with Gene Deal? He is everywhere talking about nothing, who was privy to almost 2 decades of abuse and BS, but said nothing. That's the complicity I'm talking about. Complicity I'm discussing. All of the record executives that were complicit and knew full well that Puffy, P. Diddy, was not only a thief, an abuser, a talentless man, was scheming on other people's skill sets. And it's deep, but you need those people to be complicit in order to keep the machine going. We're going to get deeper into that. And the fourth is the complete erasure of agency. So Black women in particular are what's the word I'm looking for? We're polarized or we're ethered into 2 different corners, and we're made to either be the victim or the perpetrator. And oftentimes it's conflated with the illusion of agency. Like, well, you had the option to be here. You're an adult. No one's making you stay, or that's one option. We saw that with a lot of the victims in the Diddy documentary. Another example of erasure of agency, which we see in hip hop often, not as often discussed as the victim aspect, but the women that are blown up to be celebrities are in charge of their own rap or artist persona. And then when you peel back their onion and they tell their true tale, it was the production machine, or someone else was writing their narratives, or I never really wanted to get the BBL, or I didn't really want to write these lyrics. I really wanted to sing gospel, and here I am talking about Tatiana. I don't know what the example is for this credit, but my point would be the illusion of agency is often taken away once you decide to enter into these systems of oppression, because what would it do if you really had your true voice and full control? You change the game. So gotta take that away. I'm in the chat. Yes. Okay. So I'm back in the chat. I was jumping around and I'm rambling, checking in to see if anybody's still there. We've got someone referencing Mark Curry's impersonation. Mark Curry was a great addition to the documentary, if I must say so myself, because he pointed out the fact that Diddy, throughout all of these instances with different artists, was the least talented in the room every time. Not only was he the least talented, according to this documentary, he was notorious from stealing the destinies of others and exploiting the talent and the would-be revenue that they could potentially bring into the company. So he was awful. Yes, we're going to get into Capricorn because let's talk about her agency. Can we? Can we not? You're someone's right hand woman for years. Yeah, you got to check. But think about all the other women that you consciously helped to usher into a cycle of abuse. You talking about it? We're not talking about it. Okay. So let's go into body commodification and specifically how we saw within the doc. So we saw for almost 4 episodes that these Black women's bodies, more often than not, were coerced into participating in acts with Sean P. Diddy Combs. It was a physical coercion. We were getting stories and details of abuse from allegedly back when he was at Uptown, where he allegedly abused Misa in front of millions. Goes all 4 of these, the 4 of these framework pillars are going to be referenced over and again. So we have body commodification with the fact that Diddy was on record for taking women's bodies, agencies away from them, and then allegedly would force them to stay in relationships with them. And his driving motivation for doing that, according to the documentary, wasn't even an original motivation. He was attempting to emulate Mr. Alpo. What's Alpo's real name, y'all? I forget. I'm gonna have to pull up Alpo's name, but he was the big shot that was at the rooftop in New York, the rooftop nightclub reference that they made, and allegedly Alpo is this big hotshot who was notorious for showing video of his sexual escapades with women on the large screen in order to further degrade them and make himself look like a big man. Now, probably 8 times out of 10, these sexual encounters were not consensual, and so it was pretty much disgusting. But that was how Alpo got his name and would put fear would incite fear into others, women in particular, of course, taking away their self-respect and their dignity, but also to other men. Also, I wanted to know if anyone else paid attention to all the many little pebbles of homoeroticism that were dripping throughout this documentary. Allegations that these men, Diddy in particular, had more of an affinity to impress other men than that of doing right by these women. So, anywho, Diddy is example with the Misa example, the documentary, going back to the Diddy documentary, referenced Diddy beating on Misa, also taking away the consent and sexual dignity of Joy Dickerson Neal. I do have that name correct. I found her testimony quite prolific and made me very emotional because she was one of several women who alleges that Diddy drugged them and then took advantage of them sexually, recorded it, and placed it on the larger screen. So these women, I gave 2 examples. We can probably go about 4 or 5, but Aubrey O'Day was one of the other more convincing and prolific testimonies that we saw at the end. I liked how the director framed it at the very end. We were bookend. We started with Joy Dickerson Neal because Diddy has been doing this allegedly since the late 80s, early 90s, this mortifying practice, if you will. And then we closed with Aubrey O'Day on the 4th episode, recounting her recent experience and the fact that she's still trying to grapple with the fact that her body was no longer hers. And it was told to her in the most horrific way that she was sexually assaulted, allegedly. But women's bodies ended up ultimately becoming the price of entry into these systems. Diddy knew early on, because he's an insecure little man, that one of his ways to gain favor and power, viewed as powerful amongst other men, was to commodify Black women's bodies. So he did that through force, abuse, coercion, taking away your agency. And then he was also very specific into the women that he chose to plot on, paying special attention to the fact of their backgrounds. Were they familiar with him as an artist? Did they have enough money? Come on, capitalism, to finagle to get out of these situations. So the less money or your situation that wasn't as supported makes you more vulnerable and susceptible to the systemic oppression. Where are you coming from? What you got? What can you do to get out of these situations once you get in it? survival. And he also preys on the fact that several of these women were hopeful. So let's just say some of them, the women he preyed on because they were the lovers or the love interests of other men. So another homoerotic lob, if you will. Diddy would see a man in power, note who he was either dating, dealing with, or the woman that was on his arm as an accoutrement. Diddy would say, I want that woman. If I can't have him, that's my allegation. I want that woman. And then would immediately pursue her and every attempt to control her, to have her, to add her to the collection. So taking over your body and what you can do with it, where you can go, how you can move it around, key. Y'all still there? Anybody there? I love it. Okay. So something that's really painful before we move on to the next pillar is a lot of these women start off by choosing to participate in the game. So the oppressors, Diddy, absolutely have a plan. They have a victim in mind. They know who they're coming to play with. But think about the agency that comes in on the other side of that. So, yes, we are young. Yes, we are vulnerable for sure. But what is it about society that continues to dangle that carrot, that elusive centering of men, centering of that glamorous life, centering of the hot girl lifestyle, which is essentially what nails done, hair done, everything big. Daddy got it. He gonna spend it. We love that hot girl lifestyle. Hot, hot, hot. Money, money, money. Capitalism. And it's usually at the hands of a man, right? But you go into the situation hopeful, thinking that your outcome is going to be different, knowing full and well the receipts say it's never going to be different. That's what patriarchy proves. It's never going to be different. So then we have to dial back as we're watching this documentary and peeling back the onions and really taking our time to understand the victims. We try not to judge. So why did they stay? Because shame is a powerful thing. That's why Diddy pulls out the camcorder. Not his original idea. That's an Alpo idea. But shame is a powerful drug. Being a poor is a powerful drug. Okay? How are you going to go from eating ahi tuna on the yacht to standing in a chow line? Ask Kirk Burroughs. It's not a fun place. Why do you stay? Well, the abuse creates a cycle of dependency. And again, that hope is a survival mechanism. So outside of those other two, the last one is that hope. I just hope that tomorrow is going to be different. And I hope that he won't beat me so bad next time. And I hope that things are going to change. But you know full and well that the system is designed for zero change. Can't maintain if change is upheld, or we try to get some change infiltrated there. So the bodily commodification of the hot girl of the hot girl industrial complex always asks things like, if you want this access, just know that your body is going to be one of the primary sources of currency. And it's your job to answer the question. Do you want to pay? Lil Rod didn't want to pay. But we're not talking about them. We're talking about the women. Moving on. Narrative control. So the documentary also went into depth about Diddy's controlling of the narrative. I thought it brilliant that it opens up with Diddy trying to micromanage the lawyers, the videographers, and getting frustrated about the FBI agents that are watching him, because this is the countdown episode 1, frame 1, the countdown to Diddy's indictment. And this footage that we're watching, essentially Curtis and the director confiscated it because Diddy was so audacious and narcissistic. He just knew he was going to get off. So he hired a videography team to follow him around and document his grand escape plan. I'm sure he was going to try to use the footage and control the narrative. Come on, second pillar. But the gag is Diddy is notorious for not paying his bills, didn't pay the bill after he got arrested. So Curtis swoops in. The rest is history. Netflix needed to cut the check too. Everyone needs a check in this Trump economy, okay? So the second pillar is narrative control. And I thought it was brilliant that the director opens up with the fact that Mr. King of controlling all narratives lost control. as we can see. So for 30 years almost, Diddy's narrative, he always took pride in getting ahead of the narrative. Even if you go back, the doc starts as early as the City College in New York event where Diddy jumped in front of the media to try to course correct how it was going to be spun. I feel bad about this instance, but I'm going to be the name that everyone remembers, not the 9 victims. Come on, somebody. Narrative control. It's not by accident, and it is not an afterthought. It is beyond calculated, and you need it to happen in order to silence the truth. So, people who are often harmed, underpaid, discarded, abused, they never get a chance to control the narrative, right? Patriarchy depends on controlling the narrative so that the oppressors can protect themselves. Excuse me, I had a brain fart. So many of us bought into the story though. So Diddy was able to control the story from his college days. He jumped in front of the story when Biggie died and flipped it into, oh, I'm so sad, I lost my best friend. We all jumped into it. We were every step I take. We were Diddy bopping right along, he and Sting. The truth, allegedly, was that Faith was miserable during that live performance. She allegedly has been on record in her own book of memoirs, crying, upset for weeks, and Diddy pressured her even to sing and record. He never properly got Sting to record that track. So now every time you hear it, I think it's like $2,000 to $5,000 he gets in royalties, or Bad Boy gets in royalties, or has to pay Sting in royalties, something ridiculous. My point is, there's so many instances of Diddy's rush to control the narrative to further paint himself as a genius, a talent, a superstar, a doting father, a doting, he's never a vice husband, but a doting partner. Look at all the ways that for almost 10 years we thought he and Cassie were the perfect couple. Y'all remember that Diddy even had, I thought this was interesting. They didn't go into a lot of Cassie in this documentary, but because we were alive in the same time that Diddy's was a real pop star and this was like relevant. Do y'all remember when Cassie shaved her head? I'm telling on my age, but she shaved half of her head and then the other half was like this swoop, this long swoop, and all the girls were thinking that was like the style. That was a secondhand style decision because he had smacked the Joe Jackson hell out of her, and she had to make something shake. But when you control the narrative, you can spin it that you've got a young ingenue who's trying to be a new style muse or abuse victim. Blink twice, okay? Narrative control is beyond scary, especially in the Sean P. Diddy Combs instance, because we looked at this documentary, did an excellent job for over 3 decades, and we ended up with our mouths agape questioning, how do we allow this monster to ascend to such heights in our pop culture society? We are giving him awards, BET Achievement Awards, allowing him to write checks to universities, giving out honorary degrees, encouraging him to have his own media company, Daddy's house. There's a pattern here. But we're part of that problem. We sang the songs, we wrote the checks, we clapped, we celebrated, we casted the votes. We were right there with it, helping drive this machine. So this narrative control instance that we see in the documentary is needed to uphold systemic oppression. And it's not just Diddy, it's not just the music industry. Additional record labels, media outlets. Oh my gosh, media outlets. And even into our interpersonal lives, or our micro examples bring it down from big examples that seem like they don't impact us, but to our smaller point, where in your own life do you tend to let someone else's narrative control your truth? It may not be now in this season, but it can happen in the workplace, an interpersonal relationship, an environment. And when that narrative is controlled, think about whose voice is silenced. It's often the more vulnerable and those that need empowered voices. So maybe if that's not you in this season, have you been complicit? Come on, back to another pillar. When someone else's voice can be amplified. We have to work to stop these systems of oppression, and patriarchy is the devil, okay? All right. So as you think about that, we're going to move on to the third pillar, and that is complicity. Yeah, that's the right word. Complicity as survival. So we've touched on this earlier when I was rambling, but the system of patriarchal oppression doesn't search for willing participants. It's not that covert. So the system, the machine needs decent hearted people that are in vulnerable positions, weak minds, or minds that can be easily swayed, so that they could present a situation to them so that it can prey on your scarcity. Let me bring that back around. There are people that are around the ones that are empowered. If you take a look at everyone in the documentary, okay, that Diddy was surrounded by so much complicity from the board of directors, his fellow industry peers, the artists he worked with, the security guards, the party promoters, makeup, hair, the people that come and do the wellness IVs. I mean, everyone had to have known that this man was horrific, right? But he couldn't have been horrific alone. And I think about that internal circle it spreads out to the larger circle. So yes, we can quickly judge all of the inner circle, but then it spreads out to us again, as I just mentioned. We all knew as well. I mean, how many times are we going to watch artist interviews from the 80s and 90s where they spoke out about the fact that Diddy never paid us? We knew Diddy wasn't paying the locks almost 20 years before he was signing new artists. Lil Rod, Lil Rod is in the documentary at the last section talking about Diddy never paid me for the Love album. That is the most recent album that has come out. I think that was like 2024, 2023. We can go back to Jodeci days, okay? Where Devontae, I think it was Devontae. Y'all remember that gossip, that tea, that allegedly he got beat up, broke into his house, sexually assaulted? Somebody needs to I might do my own Googles on that one. Same Diddy thing when he was asking for more money from the Jodeci albums. Yeah, we never really heard back from Devontae. But the point is, everyone must be complicit in order to get their needs met in the short term. The gag is patriarchy. Yes, all allegedly. Thank you, Amanda. Allegedly. Patriarchy depends on your complicity in order to keep trudging along. And the gag is that no one ever really gets the reward they're promised. So it's all dependent on a lie. It's a sham, a fraud, a scam, a scheme that Todd set up, co-conspirated by Wendy and Eddie Osefo. I'm just teasing. But not everyone is evil that willingly participates in this complicity and in the patriarchal system. They're just hopeful, or they're in need, and they think that there's no other options than to be complicit. Just shut up, go along, and get along. What are my options? Diddy's going to come in with the baseball bat and take away my 25%. Okay. We saw Cassie trying to leave physically, and she was unable. So there's so many examples in this documentary, alleged stories that by force, coercion, thievery, lies, you're forced to stay in situations, but sometimes it's just you'd rather not. So you do. You just keep quiet. I'll never forget one of the most moving parts to me. I go back to Joy Dickerson, is when she was sharing, Joy Dickerson Neal, in the first part of the documentary, about how she went to her friends in the industry, her peers, and she shared with them that she was sexually assaulted. Her self-dignity is going to trash because he's putting it up everywhere. What can y'all do? Y'all know him. Y'all are my people. And they replied to her, sis, if we do that, we can't get into his parties. Sometimes it's just that simple. I mean, it's not right, but self-preservation and personal self-interest in the short term are often going to take precedence. We got to wonder why that is. That ends up becoming the fault of us as a society, right? Because you're not looked down upon if you say no, or if you speak out, or if you help the lesser. You're more celebrated when you're complicit. You're rewarded when you're complicit. So complicity and closure, like, it often looks like survival, just people thinking that they did the best they could with what they had at the time. So as you watch these documentaries and these news stories come out, where in your life are you remaining complicit? Are you just going along to get along? And no, you're not Kirk Burroughs. You know what I'm saying? Can we just sidebar talk about the fact that Kirk actually was on record telling us, yeah, I knew he beat up Misa, but I just thought that was a one-off. Kirk, this was his fifth one-off, and this was still in the 90s. Sir, we don't come back to that because, again, it's a lot of alleged going on there. But we don't have to always just judge what we see. We can also use this to think about how we are complicit in our own lives, and we uphold a lot of these patriarchal institutions. They're just frameworks in our life that we have imitated. And we don't have to shame ourselves. Safe space, just be honest. And the last pillar from the framework, my hot girl industrial complex, is the erasure of agency. And not only just the erasure, but the illusion. I love saying illusion because people love to act like we are so empowered now. It's the mid 2000s, 20s. What are we calling this decade? I don't even know. I'm so old, but blessed, right? Black women are very rarely cast in our full complexities in our stories that we tell. We're either the superwoman, the sexual vixen, or being victimized, especially in this documentary. And I don't believe this is going to be another video, a larger conversation, that when women, Black women in particular, are allowed to tell the breadth of our stories and take ownership of it, that patriarchy would be allowed to sustain itself. Because part of the story is propping up, now it's morphed a little bit, propping up women to stand alongside men in media instances and tell our stories, but we still don't have full agency of what's being said. So let me break this down because I'm spinning. In a broader narrative, women, yes, we are violated, and yes, some chose to participate, but you erase the agency when you don't talk about the element of abuse and coercion and lack of resources and tools that the women had when they were forced to make these decisions. And there's agency in all of this throughout the story for all of the women that were listed as examples. So, yes, some did stay silent for years, but some also decided to speak out. Cassie ended up being the tipping point. Yes, some women did work for P. Diddy, right? Capricorn, I think Candace mentioned her in the chat. She was a huge portion in the documentary because she gave context to the fact, I thought it was moving, that the power dynamic that she experienced being an employee from someone who was batshit crazy and being forced to do things based on her survival. That's what I'm looking for, y'all. I just had a brain fart. Capricorn's need for survival was her job. And Diddy dangled that in her face for years. We saw that in the documentary. She even went on record. She was one of the women who was listed in the court deposition. I believe she testified against P. Diddy. And some women were complicit. Yeah, but they also had very few options. I think of Kim, right? So Kim, allegedly, they didn't do a lot of Kim talking. Not little Kim, who they didn't mention at all, but I mean Kim, baby mother Kim. What is her last name? I'm having a brain fart. Porter. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Kimberly Porter. Kimberly Porter allegedly found Diddy, by the way, in the by, through allegedly modeling with Russell Simmons, was passed from Russell Simmons to Andre Harrell, where she was spotted by Diddy. Patterns. However, these are all allegations. And I'm sure she, from Columbus, Georgia, with no college education, had so much to offer outside of her physical body. She also had very few options. What are your options when you're a pass around in a man's world? You're going to get that money, get those children, get that bag, and do your best to protect them while you're in your own system of oppression. You're doing the very best you can to survive and protect yourself. Now you have to protect your children. It's a lot. So my point would be agency is not just a black and white thing. In most of these instances, it's very complex. And the goal is going to always be to make you feel that black women's agency is very black and white, but that's not the truth. And then on top of that, not only it being complex, oftentimes patriarchy will present an illusion that women had more choice in situations that they genuinely did not. That's the bullshit. You got to look a little deeper, think with a lot more clarity and critical thought about how systems are truly designed. Because if your grandmama didn't have a credit card until the end of her lifetime, or was eligible for a credit card until the end of her lifetime, what advancements do you think Cassie and Kimberly Porter are going to be making in less than 20 years as far as fighting said patriarchy and demanding their own rights? Survival, still survival. And how much is agency really coming into play? How far can it really go? Especially if these women don't know and love themselves. Which brings me to the restoration portion. So before I get there, look, I just jumped all around. Let's take a quick pause. We're like 40 minutes in and I'm just rambling. What does this mean for us? So we examined 4 pillars. According to my notes, we were clear in watching the documentary that yes, Black women's bodies were commodified. These narratives were tightly controlled from the rooter to the tutor. We didn't know anything. Well, you could pretend to not know anything until this documentary. Who knew Diddy was a monster? Complicity is also packaged as a survival technique for not just Black women, but Black men as well, young people too, especially the most vulnerable. But complicity, it can be a survival technique and it's definitely used. And women's agency, it's very complex and has a propensity to be erased. So we're going to continue to examine these frameworks throughout different pop culture instances. But for this case study, if you will, this real talk discussion on P. Diddy's documentary is very important. So if you go back and watch it again, now you could potentially have a different framework to pay attention to the doc and note some of the patterns. Because essentially it's not a Diddy problem. This is a systemic problem. It's a systemic issue that is made very clear in the record industry and the takedown of Diddy as a monster. But he was allowed to be a monster for 30 years. The system made room for a new monster. Before Diddy, there were other monsters, were there not? Aren't there other monsters now alongside of Diddy? So this makes us take a deeper look at the systems that keep those that help keep these systems in operation. Russell Simmons, absolutely, who jetted off to Bali over 7 years ago now. We haven't heard anything of him. And allegedly, his sexual crimes and allegations are pages long. So we learn that these systems aren't just operationally like in a vacuum. They depend on us to keep them going, us being citizens, victims, the audience, the consumers, all the eyes, the clicks and the views. Anyone that doesn't center themselves, they depend on us to keep it moving. And the institutions honor all of that without any accountability. If we don't hold these systems and institutions accountable, who will? They're only focused on the capitalistic gain and the continued and furthered exploitation because it can be used as capitalistic gain. So who, if anyone, is going to hold them accountable? Starts within our individual acknowledgement that we have the power to do better amongst ourselves and the ability to, and then we can go out into the world and challenge other institutions, challenge other people, right? And the reckoning is when you go back and watch, where are you complicit? Where are the times where we celebrate when we could have questioned? When did you stay silent because it was safer? No shame. Or preferred, more comfortable? And where and how do you benefit on these systems that are built on exploitation? So in this example, it's the music industry, right? But I've got girlfriends that still love scrolling and sending me clips from the shade room. Micro example of a macro. Things that you can take your time with and dissect on your own, journal through it at your own leisure. But I challenge you to think a little deeper. So we're going to take a second and then we're going to go through 5 more actionable frameworks to move from just analysis to actionable practice for self-love and self-restoration. So that if you're watching live or in the replay, you can go about this next couple of days or week with some actionable practices in mind to live and love better. So, we understand the problem, but understanding the problem doesn't really provide liberation. The two are not synonymous. So you can know better, but do you do better? You're charged to do better. So in this series, we're going to always try to close with ways that we can live better and love better so that we're not just critiquing and blowing hot air. How do we show up differently? How do we love more intentionally? And how do we heal our bodies and remove shame? How do we rewire our minds and center them on things that are positive, love, and of God, right? And not of the darkness. One thing that I failed to point out about my takeaway from the documentary was how deeply dark every interaction was with Diddy. The documentary did a great job of painting him as a dark individual. And when I say dark, I mean like spiritually unhappy. He did not seem very well. He made several references, Diddy, in the documentary about waiting on God, depending on God, but it wasn't his responsibility. It's everyone else's responsibility to handle things on his behalf. No accountability. I made note of his tattoo on his back. Another video or someone in the comments can leave more information if you're familiar with the reference of the spiritual entity that is tattooed on his back. Wasn't Christian. And then it was a necklace that Diddy was wearing. I've seen a couple of documentaries that were referencing this necklace. And then there was also this very eerie reference. And I think it was the 4th episode where Diddy references himself as like the son of God. All of which I'm saying, I'm not questioning any of, I mean, I am questioning, but I'm not here to question Diddy's sanity or his spiritual practices. I'm here to point out the fact that this is a spiritual warfare. If whether or not we want to acknowledge it or not, on this channel we do. There are dark forces in this world. There are enemy and nasty. The enemy is rampant and running around. And it was very, very clear in that documentary that there is a battle going on in the mind. It's a battle waging in Diddy's mind that he's taken out and put into the world. And I think that we need to have spiritual armor to fortify ourselves in a world that is so dark. And that's where this transition is leading up to. So I've created God has helped me create a framework called the Love Meditations that's based on 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1-8. So this is very faith-based. But I have actionable steps, 5, if you will, that will hopefully prompt more self-love, self-reflection, and self-actualization so that you can realize that you're primarily only responsible for one, yourself, but you have the best example to take the best care of yourself, the Lord, God, and that your most important charge is to love. But it starts with loving yourself so that you can better love other people and better guard yourself against the Diddies of the world. That's the intention anyway. So the love meditations, I will go into that in a deeper video, but I wanted to break down the 5 pillars really quickly and then share your 5 actionable steps should you choose to take them for the upcoming week. All right. The 5 pillars of the love meditation are pretty important, but the love meditations essentially answer the call that a Christ-centered and love-centered framework, as I mentioned just a second ago, is the answer to a lot of the oppressive and patriarchal forces in the world. It starts with you. So the 5 pillars speak directly to the hot girl industrial complex, where patriarchy says men's narrative or patriarchy is the truth. The love meditations would suggest that God's word is the truth, right? And patriarchal oppression would suggest that complicity is survival because that's all that we need to survive. It's coming from a scarcity mindset. The love meditations would imply that God's love is all that you need to survive. His love will fortify the love for self. So you should not center anything else, anything inclusive of capitalistic gains, the quick urge to, have a short-term game that's pretty much flesh-minded. It's very deep, but not simple. It's very simple, but deep. And then where patriarchal system can erase your agency and not pay attention to how complex you are as a human, love reminds you who you are and how complex that you are and restores all of the confidence that is within from a divine place. So it reminds you of that you're worthy of all aspects of your story to be shared, told, and never silenced. It encourages you to live in your truth, right? And love also says that your body is sacred. I forgot that part where patriarchal oppression tends to commodify the body and oppress it, abuse it at every turn. Love says that your body is sacred to be cherished, honored, and protected. So, quick review of our 5 pillars. Love is in motion. We're talking about love in motion, excuse me. So, being present in your body and remembering that your body is not a burden, it is your blessing. Love is anchored in faith. So faith is your anchor, and this is Christian faith. So love is going to steady your soul and steady your mind. And when in doubt, turn inward and upward, not outward. And love radiates self-love. The love meditations is having a radiant view, having a strong view of radiating self-love. Let's try that one more time. So you remind yourself often that you are the greatest love of your life and based in God's example. So there's no need to center a man, a dollar amount, a job, a title. You are the love. You are the greatest project you will ever work on. And you have all of the resources that you need. It's divine. You're made in a divine image. And the 4th pillar, sacred community. Love encourages sacred community and sacred connections. So when you're surrounded by love, you encourage your community. You encourage a loving community so that you can keep that love going. And you want to be in community so that you can rise higher in love, that you can grow. Iron sharpens iron. And lastly, on the love meditation pillar, love is intentional. So you focus on having an intentional daily practice and intentional living so that you can leave a lasting legacy of love. So it's intention with a larger purpose in mind, right? How you do anything is how you do everything. But discipline is often such a frowned upon word, and we're going to try to flip that on its head. Discipline is divine order and helps to strengthen us for the long haul and makes us stronger, helps strengthen that love muscle. And clearly we all need some more love. And your discipline is divine, right? So our last takeaway, so we only have a few more minutes, we're going to take an actionable practice from each pillar of the love meditation so that we don't leave with this heaviness from the documentary with just critique. We can actually move forward in practices of love, and maybe that'll help us better recognize patriarchal oppression. Oh, hold on, chat. This chat question says, Diddy calls himself love and God. So how can people tell the difference between authentic love and not? Great question. I will let you answer that in the chat. I thought that the documentary honestly did a great example of presenting that or framing that and answering it simultaneously without even mentioning Christian love or Christian faith or spiritual love or spiritual faith. It was almost embarrassing. So, for example, I think I touched on it at high level, and I'm not a pastor. This is Megan's opinion. Divine love, just as the love meditations in my practice, the divine love is clearly laid out as what love is defined in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1-8. It is a step-by-step framework as to the definition of love, the characteristics, the charge, and what its intention is. It's a call to action. When Diddy uses the word love, it's very much commodified, an attempt to, hold on one second. It's an attempt to market, to commodify, to be self-serving, and ultimately to scare others. So everything about love that is in the divine example or definition, Diddy never exemplified in real time or in practice. So even calling himself God, little g or not, his power was quickly turned on its head at the end of his reign, right? That's not God. That's not loving. That's not authentic. If everyone he came in touch with could not echo any portion of love, could not bear witness to his love in practice, could not bear witness to any moral change or enlightenment being anywhere in his orbit, I think that is the answer in itself, because love is none of those things. Matter of fact, because I have you all here on this live and it's mine, let's go through the definition of love. I should have done that for my love meditations. 1 Corinthians. I didn't know we were going to have Bible study, y'all. I got to read it exactly. Here's the definition. Should I put it in the chat? I'm going to put it in the chat. And this is when Paul was talking to the Corinthians, but he's pretty detailed. Now, why are they giving me the summary? Okay. Though I speak with the tongues of men and angels, but they may not have love. But I may not have love. I have become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and I understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails, but whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. And whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. Now, this single scripture is what is the guiding framework for the love meditations. And to potentially answer the question in the chat, Diddy can call himself anything, but what does his life's action say? What does his work say? What love is a verb. So in Diddy's life actions, none of them match up to the description of love. So I think the deeper question would be like, why don't we all know what love is, so that we could have challenged Diddy's false positioning of love? We should be able to quicker see that he's a lying scam artist. This is a scheme that Todd set up. You can't call yourself Father Love and you're not cutting checks and running around beating people with baseball bats. And where's Wendy Williams? You know what I'm saying? I'm sure she could tell us he has no parts of the love. He ain't seen no parts of love. But I love that question, actually, Amanda. Didn't even know we were going to get there, but I love that question because it further affirms that the framework for the love meditations is needed for that very reason. You cannot question love if you don't know what love is for yourself. So the key is to know it for ourselves, living it within ourselves, so that we can quickly spot when there is not love present anywhere else. Ooh, I just ministered to myself. So that can be outward in the ether webs, in our workplaces, or within our interpersonal relationships, or in our own heads. How are we speaking and thinking about ourselves? Which brings me back to our pillars. It starts with you. It's so easy to judge how someone else is not living their life and what they're doing wrong and how they're offending you, and blah, 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 blah. Part of the growth work, which is where I'm being stretched myself, safe space, is to focus on yourself. You can't control everyone else. For me to sit back and think I could control Diddy, especially in this state of my life, is ridiculous and insane. But I can control myself, and I can utilize my platform to better share what I'm learning through my growth journey with you. So did that answer your question? Okay, we'll see. We've got 10 minutes, so I hope you can stay. If not, watching the replay, I appreciate you. So, first, love in motion. This week, we're going to go through the first pillar, love in motion. This week, I want you to try to aim for a 10-minute reset at least every day. I always encourage, because I'm also into wellness like all the rest of us, but seriously, I encourage body movement in a myriad of ways. I encourage everyone to try to move their body at least 4 times a week for 30 minutes to an hour. Now, if that's a little too ambitious for you, you're going to start with just 10 minutes a day with getting out of your head and into your body. It starts with being more present. So I want you to find a quiet space this week and stand up as upright as possible with your feet firmly planted on the ground. You're going to do 5 deep breaths, inhaling through the nose, holding it for upwards of 3 to 4 seconds. And then I want you to gently exhale, each time standing more and more upright with every inhale and exhale. And remind yourself that you deserve to be here and you're feeling safe in your own body. Every morning, try it. Remind yourself to be present and remind yourself to be thankful for the body and all that it can and does do for you, will do for you that day. So, that final affirmation that you can take away for this week will be, my body is not my burden, it is my blessing. And if you want extra credit points for yourself, funneled by me, my encouragement, get out and move your body for at least an hour. You're not hurting anything. Go for a walk, take a Pilates class. You can go for a workout, a group workout, or just go to the gym and lift some weights, but you deserve. Second, anchor yourself in faith. So this week we are anchored in faith, and I want you to pick a scripture. Yeah. I've got several suggestions I'm going to leave in the show notes for you. If you are new to finding a scripture for the week or sourcing a scripture for the week, no pressure, no worries. I've got some prompt and ready for you to go, queued up. A suggestion would be, what do I have written? Psalms 139:14. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Just remind yourself who you are in God's eyes, because it's all that matters. I like this one. I'm a little pistol starter. Proverbs 31:8. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Mark 12:31. Love your neighbor as yourself. So I'll prompt some more suggestions, but pick one for this week and get out of your own way and try to recite it and affirm it. Think about ways you can better live it, because love is an action verb. And this reminds us to stay anchored in our faith. How we set our minds is how we're going to start and set and keep our day. And this one is a practice I personally find I got to stick to. I got to push myself to. I got to journal. I got to seek the Lord, because the enemy is busy. The enemy is busy. But if you feel foggy, write it down. Get a journal. Ooh. Write it down. Take notes and assess how you feel. And extra points if you just get excited and fall into the word and keep journaling and find more and more scriptures. You're welcome here. Number 3, radiant self-love. So you're going to do some affirmation work. We all love that, where you make eye contact with yourself or you journal, which is my personal preference. And journal prompts for this week would be reminding yourself that you are loved, that you are safe, that you are seen in spite of the system, in spite of life's brokenness, in spite of feeling broken, because feelings aren't facts. And another prompt for this week to radiate some more self-love is forgiveness. Remind yourself that you forgive yourself for all that you have done this day or the week prior. It's up to you, but you deserve forgiveness and to get rid of some of that shame. So you can repeat that several times throughout the week. And number 4, find you some accountability within the sacred community. So if you don't already have an accountability group or close girlfriend that you feel compelled to call and share some things with, I need you to find her. I need you to get out there and make a conscientious effort to do so. Connect. And maybe this time or this week when you connect, it's not to share, but to listen, right? You can talk about the Diddy doc. That would be a great entry into conversation. Ask their thoughts. And then follow up with what are they sitting with? What's heavy on their heart? And it's a great place for you all to exchange. But you check the temperature by making sure that it's a safe space to exchange vulnerability and honesty. And then it's not just dumping, there's solutions and encouragement at the end of your conversations. These are the communities that we should all try to gravitate towards. And if we don't have them in our lives currently, consider how you can be the leader or the pillar in your own community. I'm pointing at myself, why I don't know, to start those conversations or to prompt your girlfriends to have more intentional and vulnerable conversations, because everyone deserves a safe space, right? And encouragement to grow. Be a witness, testify, testify, testify. And yeah, don't be isolated this week. That is the ultimate charge. We're going to rebuke isolation and getting in our heads and beating ourselves up and feeling like we're all alone. Feelings aren't facts. Lastly, intentional living and legacy mapping. So this week we're going to decide on who we would like to be on purpose, right? And I really want to think about how the Diddy doc, what we watched, how this could really impact our decisions to love better going forward. For example, this is my closing thoughts, one of two. Most of us came of age when we were young women. And now, when we watch the documentary, we are the aunties and the parents. Some of us have young children, young daughters, or daughters that are in college. Okay. I've got two girlfriends that have Howard University students right now. What's changed? I mean, sit with that. Do your lady girls in your sister circle, your young nieces, the young kids, right? Are they grappling with some of the same self-confidence issues that we were grappling with? Are they struggling to understand the systemic oppressions just like we were? And if that is the case, are we providing safe spaces for them to discuss it? Are we talking to them with encouraging language and actionable steps to remind them of who they are, that their bodies are sacred? And not sacred on some respectability politics, but sacred enough to not be taken advantage of by the patriarchal bullshit. Okay. Um, Do they have a spiritual practice? Are we affirming them in that manner or leading them with an example to get one started? And then sometimes that'll make us think about the way that we're leading our lives, because it's hard to give advice to course correct if you're not leading by example. So the lasting note would be intentional living and legacy. I want you to map out who you are deciding to become on purpose. So, from a place of either you're ready to give advice or you want to position yourself in the new year to be a better lover, a better leader in love, I would suggest a journal prompt based on my notes, which would be in 2026, what would you like to commit to do? So, maybe I want to commit to be a better service leader. In 2026, I want to commit the following changes to my body and my health. It's your world, your situation. I want to commit to improve my self-love and my healing journey by doing blah, blah, blah. The point is, you can write down a list. I'm going to share some journaling prompts as well, but think about your future casting based on your present situation and your past learnings, because we all can do better. And there are some people that are watching us. And some young woman with critical thought is actually, I hope, and I want to be a better example for whoever the stranger is watching. Like, if you were in the nightclubs in 30 years ago, you know what I'm saying? Why are you still over here celebrating Carisha, please? And like, how and why are the adults not making it better for us? When we have enough time, enough agency, and enough intelligence to do so. And when we feel that we can't, the Holy Spirit can. So that's the love meditations. You take the first step in love, God will follow up with the rest. So we just got to take our best suggestions. Like, I take my own advice, take our best. What was I going to say? Do the best we can with what we got. So we're going to start where we are with what we have. And I think that's what I have today. That's a lot of notes. Yeah. You have 5 practices for the week. Love in motion, get back in your body, get anchored in faith, get rooted in the truth of who you are, practice some radiant self-love, release some shame, and affirm who you are in God. Find you some sacred community, or be your sacred community, because you're never alone and healing never can happen in isolation. And get intentional about your legacy. and the practice that you are incorporating in your day-to-day life. So you don't have to try to be perfect. None of us are. We are so imperfect. And that is the beauty of having God to turn to, because it's not our will, but His. But if you're still here, thank you all for so much for hanging in there in the live chat. And if you're watching on the replay, thank you so very much. Check out the show notes. This is the first of several in a series. I look forward to trying to show up no matter what, because we're aiming for consistency in the new year. I can't thank y'all enough in the chat for even taking the time out for on a Thursday night. This has been awesome for me to just get it out there. And I hope you found this valuable. Any questions? Anybody still here? Thoughts? All right, kids. Well, I love you. I hope you love yourselves, because God loves us the most, and God loves you. And you deserve all the great things that are coming to you, and all of the goodness that God has for you. You truly deserve. I look forward to seeing you next time. Leave your email in the chat if you feel so compelled, or shoot me a message if you feel that I don't already have your email. And I'm going to follow up with the email opt-in so everyone can get more You Deserve Wellness in the upcoming weeks. We've got a lot in store. So I love you. Thank you so much. Share with a friend. Have a great week. Bye.